losses of about 100 occupiers. SBU drones struck the FSB headquarters in the occupied Kherson region. Long-range sanctions are finally working daily. This time, the Syzran oil refinery was under attack. And in Ryazan, after Ukrainian drone attacks, they're already complaining about gasoline shortages. Putin and Lukashenko held a joint training of the nuclear forces of Russia and Belarus. And the Kremlin has already stated that the nuclear exercises are a signal for NATO and a stab in the back for the Kremlin. Kazakhstan allowed the seizure of Gazprom's assets in the country following a lawsuit by Ukraine for nearly $1.5 billion. I suggest we talk about all this and more in detail right now. And please don't forget to like our episode. Let's get started. Security forces from the Special Operations Center of the Security Service of Ukraine attacked the temporarily occupied territory of the Kherson region with long-range drones. As a result of the attack, the headquarters of the Federal Security Service of Russia and a Panzer anti-aircraft missile and gun system were destroyed. This was reported by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. According to him, as a result of the attack on the building, more than 100 Russian intelligence officers were eliminated. There are good results from the warriors of the SBU's Special Operations Center A. The headquarters of the Russian FSB was hit, and a Panzer anti-aircraft system was destroyed on our temporarily occupied territory. Thanks to this single operation, Russian losses are about 100 occupiers killed and wounded, the head of state noted. And he added that the Russian leadership should feel that it's time to end the war with Ukraine. According to the SBU, the enemy security forces headquarters and the enemy anti-aircraft system were located in the village of Henicheska Hirka, Henichesk district, Kherson region. I'll remind you that previously, the AFU Unmanned Systems Forces, together with SBU security forces, destroyed a pilot training school of the Russian Academy of Missile and Artillery Sciences. Ammunition and components for UAVs were also produced there. The enemy's irreversible losses amounted to at least 65 people. The targeted facility was located in the occupied city of Snizhne in the Donetsk region. USF Commander Robert Magyar Brovdi clarified that Special Forces cadets of the 78th Sever Akhmat Special Forces Regiment were destroyed in this way. The number of medical casualties is still being clarified. Ukraine has created its own long-range weapon capable of destroying targets deep in the Russian rear. Moreover, Kyiv no longer needs to obtain third-party permission for this. The decision to strike or not is made independently by the Ukrainian military leadership. And because of this, things are getting worse and worse for the Kremlin every day.
It's flying, look! Damn, look at that!
See, guys, you have drones flying around here. Gentlemen, there it goes, flying towards you.
That's scary as hell, damn. They're flying over the houses.
In the 5th year of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russian citizens have a new pastime: filming the flights and strikes of Ukrainian drones and missiles.
It carries on its wing. This is a 4-shot grenade launcher, actually. On each wing there are 4 charges. It can fire 8 shots and then hit the target on its own, meaning it can be piloted and dive like a drone. So these are the kind of new things from the Ukrainian defense industry we're seeing. The guys aren't just sitting around, they're not idle, they're not sleeping. They're giving us the products.
Today, right near my neighborhood, there was a strike. What for? Why are you doing this to us? What did they ever do to you? Enough already, just stop.
And it seems this pastime is becoming a national one for Russians. It's already been played in the Komi Republic, which is over 1,700 kilometers away, Bashkortostan, and the Murmansk region. Recently, Muscovites and visitors to the capital joined in. A swarm of Ukrainian Defense Forces aerial vehicles breached the layered defenses of the heart of Moscow.
We've seemingly seen the Palyanytsia cruise missile for the first time, the Ukrainian one that Volodymyr Zelensky announced back in the spring of last year. He was speaking at an event then and said that there are these and those missiles of Ukraine's own production. And that was the first time he publicly announced the Palyanytsia missile, which hadn't been heard of before. And now in the footage from Moscow, one of the eyewitnesses filmed this cruise missile that flew right into Moscow itself. Also, unfortunately, we don't know how many are being produced or the scale of production. That's kept a secret. And plus, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported for that day that it also intercepted a Flamingo cruise missile and a Neptune MD cruise missile, which is a long-range Neptune. Though only the Russian side made claims about the Neptune and Flamingo, the Ukrainian side didn't claim this, and we don't know if it's true. because sometimes the Russian Ministry of Defense makes up facts or mixes up some names and weapon identifications.
And the more Ukrainians strike the Russian rear, the more often they wake up to explosions and air defense activity and search for bomb shelter addresses, the more they wonder, why doesn't the picture on TV match the picture outside their window?
What are the news reports saying about this? The news reports aren't saying anything. The news says everything is fine. What was happening there was just a total mess. And it's very strange to read news where everything is fine when your mother calls you in tears and an employee leaves because his sister is crying and shaking with fear in the first floor hallway because of the bombing.
Surprisingly, it was Russia that in the late 90s took as payment for gas debt. The Ukrainians had a huge stockpile of cruise missiles and strategic bombers, but 30 years later, an invasion under the guise of demilitarization sparked the growth of the defense industry. Day and night, engineers seek solutions that meet the challenges of modern warfare. And the name Firepoint rings loudest here, whose lineup reportedly already includes a domestic ballistic missile.
The FP7 is a kind of replacement for ATACMS. It's cheap and it's for short distances. That's 300 kilometers and it's lightweight. The FP9 is its counterpart, 800 kilometers with an 850 kilogram warhead.
Ukraine is fighting for independence, so the desire to be independent is deeply ingrained in us. Right now we can't be fully independent in terms of skills and materials, but we're trying to minimize imports and rely on local production where possible. We depend heavily on our partners' help with funding, intelligence, and expertise to develop the entire ecosystem, as well as general political support at various levels. In terms of skills and equipment, we try to do everything ourselves.
The indecisiveness of partners also drives Ukrainians to seek their own solutions for defense and attacking the aggressor. Shutdowns, elections playing to the electorate. While Ukrainians stand as a shield for democratic values in the world and peace for Europeans on the continent, politicians further from Russia have their own dilemmas. Lose approval ratings or make decisions on weapon supplies. Very often the choice is not in favor of the Ukrainians. But after 5 years, it seems Kyiv has found a way out of the permission trap.
Ukraine is increasingly capable of acting independently. The American debate regarding Ukrainian strikes deep into Russian territory centered on strike range, the risk of escalation, and US control over weapons supplies. From the Biden administration to the Trump administration, this trend, as the Center for European Policy Analysis notes, was evident in that Western policy toward Ukraine was often shaped by fears of escalation, and this doesn't just apply to Washington. Germany also shows a reluctance to provide Ukraine with its long-range missiles, the Taurus, for similar reasons.
True, Ukrainians still depend on partners for precision weapons and air defense systems.
For some specialized equipment, it still depends on the West. I would say mainly on precision weapons, GMLR's missiles for HIMARS rocket systems, any longer range missiles like ATACMS, Storm Shadow, missiles like those produced in cooperation with Western countries like Scalp. Then another area where Ukraine is still very dependent on the West and mostly on the United States is for missiles for air defense systems and mostly for missile defense systems. Patriot 3, the interceptors for them are very expensive and they are not produced in very large quantities.
Well, in the conditions of a long war of attrition, the aggressor himself relies on attacks with cheap weapons. And there is no point in spending expensive ammunition on it. Therefore, the lead on the battlefield is taken by the one who is first to find an ultra-cheap way to strike, and quickly puts this solution into mass production.
Ukraine continues to apply long-range sanctions against Russian oil refining. This time, the Syzran oil refinery was under attack. At the facility, with a capacity of up to 9 million tons of oil per year, located more than 800 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, a large-scale fire was recorded, according to a statement from the Special Operations Forces. The Syzran oil refinery is part of Rosneft's Samara oil refining hub and produces gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel, as well as other petroleum products. In particular, it provides fuel for Russian military aviation and military units in the center and south of the Russian Federation. Well, in the meantime, in Ryazan, complaints about gasoline shortages began after the oil refinery was shut down as a result of Ukrainian drone attacks. In general, as a result of Ukrainian attacks over the past 2 weeks, they have significantly reduced the processing of raw materials or completely stopped work at all major oil refineries in central Russia. Russian social media reports that the security situation around oil refining facilities has deteriorated significantly over the past 2 months, and no trend toward improvement in the situation is expected. All the details are in the report.
There is another commotion in Russia. This time, everyone is fussing over the situation around the oil refineries. As they say, Ukrainian long-range sanctions in action.
It is oil that is that Koschei's needle, which, strictly speaking, determines the future of Russia.
Russians are especially worried about the issue of security around the oil refineries. This is reported by the Kremlin Snuffbox Telegram channel.
Sources in the government state that the security situation around oil refining facilities has deteriorated significantly over the past 2 months. And the trend since the beginning of the year is extremely unpleasant. Oil refineries continue to suffer. The stock of spare parts is exhausted or has almost run out. The units are complex and critical, and the attacks continue, unfortunately, says the source.
At the same time, sources of the Kremlin Snuffbox claim that a fuel shortage in Russia will be avoided, at least in the coming months.
However, this task is also for the local authorities, who must already reduce consumption by non-critical enterprises. Civilians are not recommended to stock up on fuel for future use in order to avoid a sharp rise in prices. However, given the production cuts, price increases are practically inevitable.
Nevertheless, strikes on Russia's oil and gas infrastructure and sanctions pressure have already created serious problems for the Russian economy.
All the revenue that Russia receives is revenue primarily from oil. Oil, petroleum products, and to a lesser extent gas are what allow Putin's regime to exist, buy weapons, hire mercenaries, and continue the war against Ukraine. And if, for example, Ukraine systematically knocks out Russian oil refining and oil transportation, which we are seeing now, then ultimately this will create a lot of problems for Russia. This is, after all, quite complex equipment that isn't so simple or easy to repair, and most importantly, it will require money. In other words, what should be making money will be incurring losses.
In the last few months alone, Russia has lost about 10% of its oil refining capacity.
In these months alone, there's been a 10% drop in Russian oil refining. It's also important to note that Russian oil companies are being forced to shut down wells. This is even more significant. To restore production at these wells, Russia needs to do significantly more than many other oil-producing countries that close wells in response even to simple market fluctuations. The Russians can't do that. Losing production is truly very painful for them.
Furthermore, due to the comprehensive pressure on Russia, the Russian budget deficit for the first 5 months of the year has already exceeded the figures Moscow planned for the entire year. The Kremlin has reserves to continue the war, but they are not limitless.
Putin, of course, set aside money for the war, but certainly not enough to fight indefinitely. Every retaliatory strike of ours, every step we take together with our partners, every step of pressure, all of this pushes Russia toward ending the war. Right now, they already have a significant number of regions in a state of bankruptcy, and Putin is leading Russia toward bankruptcy.
And Ukraine isn't stopping there, continuing to pressure the Russian economy and oil refining further. And it's doing the right thing.
In Russia, the entire economy is essentially a few pipelines and a few dozen oil refineries. And they are all big, they are all huge, scattered across the entire territory of Russia. In other words, it's impossible to cover them completely with air defense systems. If Ukraine methodically takes them out, sooner or later, both components and repair money will run out, and ultimately the Russian economy will too. Well, whatever remains, a significant portion of the revenue will disappear. This is in the context of the general crisis of this very economy into which Putin has driven Russia.
President Volodymyr Zelensky, for his part, has already stated the effectiveness of Ukrainian long-range strikes on Russian territory. And he made it clear that Ukraine plans to intensify such strikes and has already approved the relevant plans for June.
Today, I approved our long-range plans for June, and we must creatively develop Ukrainian long-range sanctions, which showed their strength in May. I am grateful to our warriors for their precision.
Next is our traditional segment, Epiphany in the Swamps. This time, after the residents of Tuapse and Perm, the baton is picked up near Yaroslavl. And lo and behold, besides the traditional, we didn't think it would affect us, other conclusions are already being heard. This is worth watching.
So you have to sort all this out yourself. This is such a clusterfuck. Just what is happening? What is happening? They just ruined it. To hell with it. They ruined the country. There's nothing left of Ukraine. Now they've come for us. It's really scary. You know who it is. We, the ordinary people, are the ones paying. You're responsible? You started all this? What do we have to do with it? Why should ordinary people always have to suffer? That's all from me. I have nothing more. I don't know what else to say.
Just music to my ears. Why did he start this war? We all know who I'm talking about. After all, the course of drone strikes is bearing fruit. It turns out the treatment isn't hopeless, and glimmers of reason are starting to visit Putin's subjects. What's most unpleasant for the bunker grandpa is that this is already happening within the Golden Ring. And from there, the Kremlin is just a stone's throw away. And it's clear what a rat usually does when it's backed into a corner. Putin is already openly brandishing nuclear weapons and threatening the world with unpredictable consequences. The Kremlin is already threatening that the nuclear exercises in Belarus are a signal for NATO. The Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Belarus stated that Russia, as part of the exercises, has already delivered nuclear munitions to field storage sites in Belarus. Akian published a corresponding video. Russian news agencies reported that Iskander-M missiles with special munitions were deployed during the nuclear force exercises in Belarus, and Putin and Lukashenko held a so-called joint training of the nuclear forces of Russia and Belarus, which the pair watched together via video link. It's understandable. Even its owners prefer to stay away from the unpredictable Russian no-analog weapons. At the same time, the SBU stated that together with the defense forces, the state border guard service, and the police, it is conducting enhanced security measures in the northern regions of Ukraine. A nasty little surprise from the US for NATO partners. The White House will reduce the reserve of military forces that can be deployed to protect alliance members in the event of an attack on them. Details are in our report.
The states are increasingly distancing themselves from Europe. And now the US seems to be hinting altogether. In case of aggression, European NATO partners will have to defend themselves.
US President Donald Trump has made it clear what he expects from European countries: to take primary responsibility for the continent's security instead of the United States.
First, the Trump administration announced a decision to withdraw about 5,000 of its troops from Germany and cancel the deployment of long-range missiles, Tomahawk, and now a new blow. The states are going to reduce the number of troops that could be used to provide assistance to the alliance's European countries in the event of a serious crisis. This information was released by Reuters. According to the publication's sources, the Pentagon plans to announce its intention to reduce its involvement on May 22nd at a meeting of defense policy leaders in Brussels. But experts say it's too early to panic.
This is not about withdrawing American troops from Europe, but about their redeployment from Germany to Poland. The United States has redeployed units of the American Army, which completed a 1,000-kilometer march to reinforce the Polish-Belarusian border in order to minimize possible negative consequences as a result of the implementation of the so-called Suwalki Gap. That is, attempts by the Russian Federation to directly invade the territory of NATO countries, primarily Poland and the Baltic states, from the territory of the Republic of Belarus to create a land corridor with the Russian exclave, the Kaliningrad region.
At the same time, the US officially reported a reduction in combat brigades in Europe from 4 to 3, returning to the level of 2021. According to Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell, the decision is in line with the America First agenda and is supposedly intended to encourage NATO allies to take primary responsibility for Europe's conventional defense. However, Parnell also said that the Pentagon promises to maintain a strong military presence in Poland. It is the latter that the states call a model ally. According to the Americans, it is Poland that has demonstrated both the ability and the determination to defend itself. And other European countries should follow its example.
And during Trump's first and second terms, European countries, under pressure from the United States, increased funding for their own military-industrial complex and accordingly the overall funding of the NATO bloc to at least 2%. And the Polish side currently has record figures, more than 4% of GDP for defense capability.
However, it seems that NATO itself also sees no problems in the White House's decisions, at least regarding the withdrawal of 5,000 American troops from Germany. According to the Commander-in-Chief of NATO's allied forces in Europe, General Alexis Grinkewicz, the withdrawal of part of the U.S. forces will not interfere with the alliance's defense plans in Europe.
As the alliance's European pillar strengthens, the US will have the opportunity to reduce its presence in Europe and limit it to providing only those critical capabilities that the allies cannot yet provide. I cannot give exact timelines. It will be a continuous process that will last for several years.
Grinkewicz assures that he is fully confident in the current balance of power and added that Europe plans to continue increasing its defense capabilities in the future.
The deployment we have today is everything that has been announced. But in the long term, we should certainly expect to see more deployments taking place as Europe continues to build up its capacity and capabilities, gradually stepping up to ensure its conventional defense.
At the same time, the United States publicly states that the states will continue to use their nuclear weapons to protect NATO members, even if European allies take a leading role in the field of conventional forces. But where the states remain steadfast is in wanting Europe to take responsibility for its own defense. EU countries were not happy about this, but at the same time they began to act. So it is possible that Trump's plan, although risky, was certainly sobering.
Next, we will talk about the significance of Putin's visit to China. First of all, whether it will affect the course of the war in Ukraine. After all, let me remind you, on the eve of the Kremlin dictator's arrival in the Celestial Empire, Xi Jinping, in a conversation with Donald Trump, said that Putin might regret the invasion of Ukraine.
And currently, the relationship between Russia and China has reached what is truly an unprecedented level, one that has never been seen before.
Putin is ready for anything just so Xi doesn't abandon him.
I am sure that together we will continue to do everything possible to deepen the Russian-Chinese partnership and good neighborliness.
While the leaders of the United States and China met in Beijing, the Russian dictator watched what was happening with particular concern. Therefore, the Kremlin geezer rushed there immediately after the US president's visit to Beijing.
We haven't seen each other for a day, but it's as if 3 autumns have passed. We are truly very glad to see you. We are constantly synchronizing our watches, both in person and through our assistants.
The visit is supposedly timed to the 25th anniversary of the Treaty of Good Neighborliness. China has extended the visa-free regime between Russia and the PRC until December 31st, 2027. At the meeting, Putin and Xi signed a declaration on the establishment of a multipolar world and international relations of a new type.
It is based on the principles of equality and consideration of each other's interests, mutual support, friendship, and genuine good neighborliness.
But what about the facts? Washington and Beijing are trying to reduce the level of confrontation and return relations to a more predictable course. But this is very bad news for the Kremlin. And the more stable the dialogue between the US and China, the less Russia's opinion is taken into account.
Putin has been closely following the talks between Trump and Xi. And now he wants to understand what the Americans actually offered China. What is Donald Trump trying to achieve? How serious is Washington about taking action on Iran? How far is the US prepared to go regarding Ukraine? And isn't there a risk that one day Russia itself will become the subject of a grand bargain between Washington and Beijing? Because right now, a new diplomatic triangle is beginning to take shape. Moscow, Beijing, Washington. And at the center of this triangle, China is increasingly finding itself.
Putin brought along almost all of his pet businessmen. The Russian delegation consists of 39 people. There's Sechin, Miller, Timchenko, Guriev, Mikkelsen, and the oligarch Deripaska.
You don't bring delegations like that just for nice photos. This isn't diplomatic tourism or even just a show of friendship. It looks like an attempt to negotiate something much bigger. And the main topic here is, of course, power of Siberia too.
This is the last chance to persuade or try to reach an agreement with China's leader. And this is the 5th time the Russian dictator has gone to persuade China to do business with Russia.
In the current tense international situation, our close bond is especially in demand.
Putin still hopes that Xi will agree to build that very power of Siberia too.
The main parameters of understanding for power of Siberia 2 are there. They're there for the route as well. And on how it will be built, Some nuances remain to be settled, but overall, such an understanding already exists.
The Kremlin has been trying for nearly 10 years to agree on building a pipeline with a capacity of 50 billion cubic meters.
Chinese officials have expressed interest in moving forward more quickly with the talks. However, there still has not been any significant progress yet. One Russian official noted.
Since Putin launched a full-scale war on Ukraine, he has lost trade with all countries and is mired in sanctions.
The European gas market, which for decades was the main foundation of Russian influence, is effectively lost. This means Moscow needs a new major buyer, a big long-term one.
But China once again wants to get everything from Russia for free, just like with the forests and the land.
Due to the fact that gas supplies to European markets have largely ceased because of the war in Ukraine, Russia has increased exports to Asia. It is expected that within a few years, Russia will be selling natural gas to China at about a third, cheaper than Europe. At the same time, the projected annual volume of supplies to the East by 2029 will reach 52.5 billion cubic meters.
And what can I say? Russians themselves are already prepared to sell out to China.
In the event that the Russian Federation is unable to finish the school in our neighborhood, we asked the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Viktorovich Lavrov, to appeal to the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, with a proposal to fund the construction of our school as part of ethno-cultural diversity and the active development of cultural ties with China.
Xi agrees to buy gas at nearly domestic Russian rates, which is many times cheaper than the former European prices that Putin has lost.
He, by the way, is promising China. Bloomberg writes about this, for example, that Putin promised China incredible discounts, 30 to 40% off European prices, for instance, for many years to come.
And it's China that will dictate the terms because they have alternatives, coal and renewable energy sources.
China's electricity consumption balance, and 80% of that is coal and renewables, and there's actually no gas there. The share of gas in China's power generation balance is less than 5%.
But even if a contract is signed for the construction of Power of Siberia 2, it will take at least 5 years. It will reach its design capacity in about 10 years.
The Ministry of Finance actually made it very clear to Gazprom that it won't fund Power of Siberia 2. Where's the money? As we've just shown, Gazprom has no profit of its own.
Beijing has extended an economic helping hand to Moscow, helping to bypass Western sanctions and increasing purchases of Russian energy, as well as supplying vital components for the Russian military-industrial complex.
And of course, Xi has every opportunity to pressure Putin, because without dual-use goods, without chips, and without many other things, nothing of Putin's will fly, drive, or jump.
But if it proves beneficial for China, Xi Jinping could quickly cut off the supply. And then the Kremlin dictator will have to finally bring an end to the bloody war in Ukraine, putting a stop to the violence.
Xi has all the cards up his sleeves, which gives him the leverage to really force Putin to settle down and bring an end to the ongoing full-scale war. Of course, this does not mean that everything will end all at once, but at least there could genuinely be some kind of truce or temporary pause first, and then